You're probably hearing a lot about asylum, detention centers, and other immigration buzzwords in the news lately. It can be a lot to digest, so we're here to break it down for you. So let's start with the process of seeking asylum. You may be wondering, what is an asylum seeker? And how is seeking asylum different than anybody else presenting themselves at the border? Right now, many people are fleeing to the US from El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and other countries. There are virtual war zones there, where many people live in terror of constant violence by gangs and security forces. Many have no choice but to run. They often come to the southern border to ask for asylum. People fleeing violence often ask for protection. One form of protection is called asylum. To be given asylum, you have to show you were harmed on the basis of who you are, your race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or your membership in something called a particular social group. Bottom line, you shouldn't have to change who you are to be able to live here. There are a number of ways that you can request asylum. You can seek asylum when you're already living in the US or when you're crossing the border. Today we're only going to tackle one. So here's how the process works if you're fleeing violence and you're crossing through the southern border. One way that many asylum seekers seek protection is by presenting themselves at a port of entry. On the southern border, it currently looks like this. People can request asylum at the border. However, some people cross at other places on the border because they may be hesitant to seek protection at the time of arrival. Either way, at the border, something called expedited removal is the first step in the process. Expedited removal is a shortcut that the government takes in the asylum process that deprives people of a fair chance to get protection. But it's still the first step in trying to get asylum when you're at the border. Immigration officers are required to ask each person a set of protection questions to identify who is afraid to return to their country. Then, based on the decision of an immigration officer, two things can happen. Some are released, given an order to go to immigration court and argue for asylum there. But many are actually transported to immigration detention instead. When they go to a detention center, they undergo a credible fear interview with an asylum officer. To pass this interview, their fear of persecution or torture must be found credible. If it's denied, you could be immediately deported, or you can appeal to an immigration judge in a special hearing. If it's approved, you get the chance to go to immigration court and argue for asylum before an immigration judge. Sometimes you're released, many times you're not. Cases in immigration court can face wait times of more than 3 years on average. So some asylum seekers who come through the southern border can spend months or even years in detention while their case is pending. Whether or not they're released is totally arbitrary and in the hands of an individual immigration officer. Detention often compounds the trauma they've already experienced. Studies show it seriously harms toddlers and kids, some of whom may have spent huge parts of their lives in detention. You might have heard these referred to as baby jails. For example, over the last year, Amnesty International has worked to secure the release of 4 kids held at a detention center in Berks County, Pennsylvania. The kids, as young as 4 years old, were held there for more than 600 days. Some of the kids and mothers who have been held at Berks have been diagnosed with depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. After a long, arduous journey in immigration courts, asylum may finally be granted. The majority of people are denied asylum, and they may be returned to places where they're at risk of persecution, violence, or even death. But here's how you can help. Learn more about the asylum process and tell your representative to support people who are fleeing violence. No one should have to return to a place where they fear for their life.